Well, why Brisbane? Well, Maria hated the Victorian climate, and so did I. But more importantly, I wanted out of science teaching and administration and management in international schools. I was not suited to management. I was okay in the area of policy making, no doubt about that. But in terms of man management, I wasn't so good. So I had contacts with an international school in Brisbane and they wanted an ESL teacher. So I accepted. This school had a main stream of Aussies and unlike the school in Melbourne. And the overseas students were just there really bringing revenue to the school. The word was also that in Queensland there were a lot of language schools for foreign students. And I knew that foreign students were polite, hardworking, and fun. I had to make a reconnaissance trip, though, to Brisbane on my own first. So I flew up and stayed with friends of my brother, who were, I think, a little bemused at our plans. I had no idea really where to go in Brisbane. I went to a few estate agents on the south side, close-ish to the school, but I didn't like the look of them much, really. Eventually, I took a place very close to my friend's house in Northgate, in an old and a pretty grim Queenslander. My thinking, which was flawed, I think, in retrospect, was that we would be better off being close to someone we knew, that is, friends. And that's something I've always done. The problem was, it was 1.5 hours drive from the international school, which was way, way south of the city. I flew back to Melbourne and we packed up as quickly as we could. We headed north out of Melbourne for the Sun in Bluey, which was our 1982 Falcon, loaded with stuff and 3 kids. Roger was 6, Serge was 4, and Julie was still a baby. I bought a pair of Polaroid clip-on sunglasses for the drive. I don't remember much of this trip except that it took 3 days and 2 nights, and the weather slowly improved as we headed north. The kids were magnificent. They slept practically the whole way. When I saw 25 Hall Street again in Brisbane, I was disappointed, and I think Maria was too. It really was quite shabby, and the location wasn't great. Nevertheless, Rog went to Northgate Primary School, and I went to the international school every day, 1.5 hours drive there and back. Maria did a sterling job, meanwhile, keeping everything going at home. So, September 1994, the nightmare really seemed to continue. Professionally, this was my first real stab at ESL teaching, and I was starting again, really, my teaching career at 40 years old. I was nervous. It was very different from science teaching. I could see that it would take time for me to adapt my teaching style. It was a real baptism of fire. The school was in financial trouble. I was trying to save itself by importing Koreans worth $20,000 each to the boarding department. This was a great idea, except that the Koreans were really quite rough. They were street fighters. They were new money from the booming economy from companies like Samsung in Seoul. They were the spawn of the Korean tiger, the Asian tiger. And they were very badly behaved. They were immature and rude, very unlike most other Koreans I have met before or since. Most Koreans I've met are very polite and very hardworking. The English head of department was very apologetic to me, and together we worked out a plan to tame these wild Korean students. After a few weeks, we decided to expel two of them on a Friday. The headmaster agreed, and we thought that was that. Job done. But no, on the Monday when we came back to school, the head seemed to have changed her mind. The head of department and I were devastated. I knew what this meant. There would be hell from here on. And there was. A few days later, the head of discipline in the main school, who was the husband of the headmistress, he sidled up to me sheepishly, muttering, "Oh, I'm sorry about that Korean thing, the U-turn, but they are worth $20,000 each." So that was the bottom line with that school. There was also serious trouble between the Japanese and the Koreans in the boarding house. And this is something we never had in Melbourne, to our credit. Anyway, at this school in Brisbane, they used to line up and fight each other, having pitched battles on the football field. I remember thinking ruefully, maybe we hadn't done so badly in Melbourne after all. We never had trouble like that. One particular incident sticks in mind. I was asked to do a relief class in the main school of Aussies, an 8th grade high school. As I entered, I immediately spotted a little knot of troublemakers at the back in the form of boisterous youths who wouldn't sit down, keep quiet, open their books, or write down their instructions for their work. Eventually, I asked one of them to come up to the front with his book so I could get his name. I wanted to report him to the regular teacher. If I had asked him for his name, of course, he would have given me a false one. I was sitting down at the teacher's desk, and as he approached me, he turned round to face the class, parked his bum on my desk in front of my face. I pushed him off, and he went squealing out of the door of the room like a little pig, screeching. He told the head of discipline that I had touched him. After school, the head of discipline called me in and gave me a warning. Don't ever touch a student in this school again. I protested that the boy had invaded my personal space. Head of discipline wasn't interested. There was only 3 weeks left on my contract till the end of the term, so I didn't say anything more. Ironically, a few years later, when I was working at a language college, this same head of discipline turned up at the photocopier in this language college. He pretended not to know me, of course. It turned out that the school, international school, had gone bust and he was unemployed. The Koreans, even at $20,000 each, apparently hadn't saved the school. I wasn't really surprised. Back to the story, I felt humiliated, and that was it. As far as I was concerned, I had only 3 weeks left on my contract, and I determined to look for work in a language college for adults, not in a school. At the school, I remember actually walking into one of my ESL classes and not really even talking to these spoiled children who were completely ignoring me anyway. It was almost surreal. I would put on a video such as The Lion King and just sit there sulking. That is the only time in my career that I think I have been defeated. I was reduced to doing that in a lesson. I hardly spoke. The school collapsed in 2000 due to financial mismanagement.